Imagine waking up one morning to discover that everything you've worked for is suddenly worth almost nothing. Your savings can't buy a loaf of bread. Store shelves are empty. The electricity cuts out without warning. Hospitals no longer have basic medicine. Friends and neighbors begin packing their bags, not for a vacation, but for a one-way journey into the unknown. This isn't the plot of a dystopian movie. It happened in one of the richest countries in the world. Today, Venezuela is known for economic collapse, mass migration, and political turmoil. But just a few decades ago, it was a symbol of prosperity. People from Europe and across Latin America dreamed of building a new life there. Oil money fueled massive development, modern highways, impressive skyscrapers, and one of the highest living standards on the continent. So how did a country with the world's largest proven oil reserves reach a point where millions of its own citizens decided to leave everything behind? This is the story of why millions are leaving Venezuela. To understand what happened, we need to go back to a time when Venezuela seemed unstoppable. For much of the 20th century, Venezuela enjoyed extraordinary wealth thanks to oil. After vast petroleum reserves were discovered, international companies poured billions of dollars into exploration and production. As global demand for oil grew, Venezuela became one of the world's leading exporters. Money flowed into government budgets at an astonishing pace. Cities expanded rapidly. Modern infrastructure appeared across the country. Education and healthcare improved. The capital, Caracas, became one of Latin America's most important financial centers. People often referred to Venezuela as the Saudi Arabia of South America. Immigrants arrived from Spain, Italy, Portugal, Colombia, and many other countries, believing Venezuela offered opportunities unavailable elsewhere. For many families, it truly did. But beneath this success, a dangerous weakness was growing. The country's economy became increasingly dependent on a single resource. Oil generated the overwhelming majority of export earnings and government revenue. Instead of developing manufacturing, technology, agriculture, and other industries, Venezuela relied almost entirely on petroleum. As long as oil prices remained high, few people questioned the system. But economies built around one commodity often become vulnerable. When prices rise, prosperity seems endless. When prices fall, the entire system begins to crack. During the 1980s and 1990s, Venezuela faced economic instability, rising inflation, and increasing public frustration. Many citizens believed that despite the country's enormous natural wealth, corruption and inequality prevented ordinary people from sharing in its success. This dissatisfaction reshaped Venezuelan politics. In 1998, Hugo Chávez was elected president after promising sweeping reforms. He pledged to reduce poverty, fight corruption, and return the nation's wealth to its people. For many Venezuelans, Chávez represented hope. During years of high oil prices, his government launched ambitious social programs funded by petroleum revenues. Millions gained improved access to healthcare, education, and subsidized food. Poverty initially declined, and Chávez became enormously popular among many supporters. However, the government also expanded its control over large parts of the economy. Private companies were nationalized. Price controls were introduced on many essential goods. Currency controls limited access to foreign exchange. Businesses faced increasing regulation and uncertainty. Critics warned that these policies discouraged investment and reduced domestic production. At the same time, Venezuela became even more dependent on oil exports to finance government spending. As long as global oil prices remained high, these structural problems were partly hidden.
Then, everything changed.
In 2014, international oil prices collapsed. Government revenues shrank dramatically. Since oil accounted for the vast majority of Venezuela's export income, the country suddenly lacked the resources needed to import food, medicine, machinery, and other essential products. The economic crisis quickly deepened. Factories slowed or stopped production. Businesses closed. Supermarket shelves became emptier each month. Long lines formed outside grocery stores as people waited for basic necessities. Families often spent hours searching for milk, flour, cooking oil, or medicine, never knowing whether supplies would arrive. For many Venezuelans, daily life became a struggle for survival. But the worst was still to come. As the economy continued to unravel, the government responded by printing more money to cover its growing budget deficit. On paper, this seemed like a solution. In reality, it accelerated one of the worst episodes of hyperinflation in modern history. Prices no longer changed every month or every week. They changed every day. Sometimes they changed within hours. Workers rushed to spend their salaries as soon as they were paid, because waiting even a few days could mean their money would lose a significant portion of its value. Savings that families had built over decades disappeared almost overnight. Imagine spending your entire life putting money aside for retirement, only to discover that those savings could no longer buy a single meal. This became reality for millions of Venezuelans. Businesses struggled to keep up with constantly changing prices. Many simply closed their doors. Others reduced staff or stopped operating altogether because they could no longer import raw materials or replace equipment. Unemployment and underemployment spread across the country. Hospitals faced another devastating crisis. Medical supplies became increasingly difficult to obtain. Pharmacies frequently ran out of essential medicines. Doctors worked under impossible conditions, often lacking even basic equipment needed to treat patients. Preventable diseases began to return after years of progress. The healthcare system, once considered among the strongest in the region, came under enormous pressure. Power outages became another part of daily life. Entire cities sometimes lost electricity for hours or even days. Water shortages affected millions of households. Internet access became unreliable, making work, education, and communication even more difficult. Daily routines turned into constant uncertainty. Parents worried about feeding their children. Young professionals saw no future. University graduates realized they could earn more washing dishes abroad than working in their own professions at home. That was the moment many people made the hardest decision of their lives. They chose to leave. Not because they wanted to abandon their country, but because they believed they had no other option. Some packed everything they owned into a single suitcase. Others left with nothing more than a backpack. Many families became separated, with one parent leaving first to find work before trying to bring the rest of the family later. For countless Venezuelans, saying goodbye to loved ones meant not knowing when or if they would ever meet again. The scale of this migration soon became extraordinary. Millions of Venezuelans crossed borders into neighboring countries such as Colombia and Brazil.
Others traveled much farther, settling in Peru, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, Mexico, Spain, and the United States. Many journeys were incredibly difficult. Some families walked hundreds of miles across mountains and highways because they could not afford transportation. They carried children, pushed elderly relatives in wheelchairs, and slept wherever they could find shelter. Border crossings became crowded with people searching for safety, work, and stability. International organizations describe the movement of Venezuelans as one of the largest displacement crises in the world outside of active war zones. The impact wasn't limited to Venezuela. Neighboring countries suddenly had to accommodate millions of newcomers. Schools welcomed children who spoke with different accents. Hospitals treated growing numbers of patients. Governments struggled to provide housing, employment opportunities, and public services while balancing the needs of their own populations. Some communities embraced Venezuelan migrants. Others faced growing tensions as competition for jobs increased. Back in Venezuela, another problem emerged. Many of those leaving were young, educated, and highly skilled. Doctors, engineers, teachers, scientists, entrepreneurs. These were exactly the people the country needed to rebuild its economy. Instead, many began building new lives elsewhere. This phenomenon, often called a brain drain, created a vicious cycle. As more skilled workers departed, businesses found it harder to operate, public services weakened further, and even more people considered leaving. Each departure made recovery more difficult than the last. For those who remained, everyday life became defined by resilience. Families relied on relatives abroad sending money home. These remittances became a financial lifeline for countless households, helping them buy food, medicine, and other basic necessities. In many cases, money earned by a family member working overseas became more important than local wages inside Venezuela itself. The country had reached a point where survival increasingly depended on those who had already left. Today, there are signs that parts of Venezuela's economy have stabilized compared to the darkest years of the crisis. Inflation is no longer as extreme as it once was. Some businesses have reopened, and certain neighborhoods in major cities show signs of renewed commercial activity. But these improvements tell only part of the story. For millions of ordinary Venezuelans, daily life remains extremely difficult. Wages in many sectors are still too low to cover basic living expenses. Public services continue to face serious challenges, and economic opportunities remain limited compared with much of the rest of the region. Perhaps the clearest sign of the country's ongoing struggle is that many people are still leaving. For those who have already built new lives abroad, returning is often a complicated decision. They have found jobs, enrolled their children in new schools, learned new languages, and established roots in entirely different countries. Going back would mean starting over once again, with no guarantee that conditions have improved enough to justify the risk. Meanwhile, millions of families remain divided across continents. Parents work thousands of miles away, while grandparents raise children at home. Birthdays, weddings, and even funerals are sometimes attended only through a phone screen. The cost of migration cannot always be measured in money. Often, it is measured in years spent apart from the people who matter most. Venezuela's story is also a reminder that the strength of a nation cannot be judged solely by its natural resources. For decades, The country possessed one of the greatest oil reserves on Earth.
Many believed that such wealth guaranteed a prosperous future forever.
History proved otherwise. Natural resources can generate enormous wealth, but they cannot, by themselves, create a stable economy. When a country becomes too dependent on a single industry, it becomes vulnerable to global market shocks. When institutions weaken, corruption grows, investment declines, and confidence disappears. Rebuilding that trust can take far longer than losing it. The Venezuelan crisis was not caused by a single event or one decision. It emerged from years of economic dependence, political conflict, policy choices, collapsing oil prices, international pressures, and deep structural weaknesses. Together, these factors created one of the largest migration crises in modern history. Today, more than 7 million Venezuelans are estimated to be living outside their homeland. Behind that number is a deeply personal story, repeated millions of times. A teacher who wanted to continue educating children. A doctor searching for a hospital with medicine. A father hoping to earn enough money to feed his family. A student dreaming of a future that seemed impossible at home. Each person carried a different reason for leaving. But they all shared the same hope, the chance to build a safer, more stable life. One day, many of them may return. History has shown that countries can recover, even after years of hardship. But recovery requires time, stability, economic opportunity, and above all, confidence that tomorrow will be better than today. Until then, the Venezuelan diaspora will remain one of the defining stories of the 21st century. A reminder that the greatest wealth any nation possesses is not its oil, its gold, or its natural resources. It is its people. And when millions of those people decide they have no choice but to leave, the entire world takes notice. This is why millions are leaving Venezuela.